Hi, my name is Dylan and welcome to Elementary and Intermediate Algebra Chapter 5.2. In this video we'll be going over what domain, range, and functions are, what the vertical line test is, what a linear function is, and finding the domain and range. Functions, domain, and range. A function relates an input to an output. They're similar to equations, but there are certain trademarks of a function. In a function, one input gives you exactly one output. For example, the function y equals x is a function. The domain of a function is the set of all independent variables of the function, and it's usually just x values. And the range of the function is the set of all dependent variables of the function, usually the y values. What decides a function? Something is a function if it passes the vertical line test. The vertical line test states that something is a function if a vertical line only intersects the graph once at every point. It basically states there are no two y values for one x value. If you can prove that there are two y values for one x value, you can prove that something isn't a function. For example, y squared equals x isn't a function, because if you plug in, say, 4 for x, you will get negative 2 and 2 for y. For one input, we got two outputs, meaning that this isn't a function. So the vertical line test is basically just a vertical line you can draw through a graph to decide something is a function. So let's draw a vertical line here. If this black line is a graph, this vertical line only intersects the graph once. And if we keep drawing like millions and billions of these, we'll find that each time we draw one, it only intersects the graph once. And if for every line we draw, it only intersects the graph once, this graph is a function. So this black line is a function. Right here, however, if we draw a vertical line, we notice that it intersects the graph once and twice. And if we do this multiple times, we'll find that there are multiple scenarios where the vertical line will pass the graph twice. You only need to draw one vertical line, and if you can prove that this one vertical line will intersect the graph twice, then you can prove that this isn't a function. So this little shape here, this is not a function. A function is a linear function if it can be put in the form where y equals mx plus b, and it's not really any different than linear equations. A linear function is increasing if the line goes from upward from left to right, and a linear function is decreasing if the line goes downward from left to right. We can use the graph of a function to determine the domain and range of a function. So right here we have this one graph, and it starts at 0, 0, and it keeps on going till infinity. So let's find the domain and range of this function. So the domain is the set of all independent variables, or in this case, the set of all x values. So we know that the smallest x value we can have is 0 here. So we know that the domain is 0, starts at 0, inclusive. And we know that what's the biggest value it can go to? Well, because this graph goes to infinity, we'll know that the x value will also go to infinity. The domain is 0, infinity. If we do the same thing for the y value, we'll find that the smallest y value we can get is 0, and we'll find that the biggest y value we can get goes on to infinity. So we know that the range is also the exact same thing. This graph right here is a little trickier. Instead of going on to infinity, there are set endpoints here. So let's do the domain first. The domain is, again, the set of all independent variables, and we know that the smallest independent variable we have right here is 0. This is the smallest one, and then the biggest one we have is 4. These 2 points on the right, they all have the same x value. So we know that the domain is 0, 4. And let's find the range. So the range is the set of all dependent variables, or the set of all y values. And we know that the smallest one is, in this case, negative 4. All the way down here, and the biggest one is 4. So we know that the domain is negative 4, 4. Now these are pretty easy domain and range functions, but sometimes it can be a lot trickier. For example, we know that this graph is continuous, which means that there's no sudden breaks or anything. Later on you'll realize that not all functions are continuous like this, and you can't. I'll just explain this. This range right here means that the y values of this graph can go from negative 4 to 4, which means that there's a y value for every value between negative 1 and 4. If there isn't, let's just say 0 wasn't a y value possible in this graph, we'll have to do the range a little bit differently. We'd have to do it like -4, 0, non-inclusive, and then 0, 4. And notice how it can get a lot trickier just by if one y value isn't included. And if there's multiple y values that aren't included, we have to create like separate ranges so that that way we can actually get the accurately note down what y values are possible in this graph. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something from this video.